Hello, welcome to Secure the Continent with me, Gbenga Aborowa. This is the program where we bring you up to date with all the security happenings around the continent of Africa. But before we get into today's main conversation, let me first bring you the latest security headlines across the continent. Now, the Tigray People's Liberation Front have accused Ethiopia and Eritrean forces of launching offensives in Tigray. United Nations alleges Mali's army and foreign forces of killing 50 civilians in April. At least 14 people have been killed in rebel attacks in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. And the police in Madagascar have shot at protesters seeking revenge for an abducted albino. Don't go anywhere. I will be right back. Today on Secure the Continent, our focus is on Libya as deadly clashes broke out between rival Libyan militias in the center of the capital, Tripoli, raising fears of escalating violence in the country divided between rival administrations, jostling to wrest control of the oil-rich North African nation. We have more details for you in this package.
Gaddafi in 2011 by NATO-backed forces, Libya has never remained the same. The years that have followed Gaddafi's death have been followed by power struggles and political confrontations that have led to conflicts, especially in Tripoli. Over the years, the United Nations has attempted to help the country transition into full democracy, but tensions have been simmering following the failure to hold the long-awaited elections last December and the refusal of incumbent Prime Minister Abdelhamid Dbeibeh to step down. There have been different groups who have sought control of Tripoli, the country's capital and largest city. Control of the capital is seen as control of the country. Militias are fighting for control and authority as some groups back the UN-recognized government in Tripoli, while others want the rival parliamentary leadership based in Tobruk to gain control. In 2014, after a battle for Tripoli, a faction including members of the Libyan parliament moved east and recognized War General Khalifa Haftar as its prime minister, forming a parallel government. The UN has pressed for the establishment of a government that will be recognized internationally, but has met defiance and opposition from the powers from the east. In 2019, Haftar and the Eastern Army attempted to march on Tripoli, leading to a major confrontation. A ceasefire was reached in 2020, with the UN still backing the government led by Prime Minister Abdelhamid Dbeibeh in the capital, but the failure to hold general elections in December 2021, as previously scheduled, due to disagreements among the Libyan parties, has put Libya on the edge again. According to reports by the Libyan Health Ministry, 32 people were killed in the violence. 159 were injured while houses and cars were damaged in the violence. The UN Libyan mission has called for an immediate cessation of hostilities, citing ongoing armed clashes, including indiscriminate medium and heavy shellings in civilized populated neighborhoods.
You're welcome back to the conversation, and we have live via Zoom from the Libyan capital Tripoli, Dr. Mohsen Derregia. He's the former chairman of Libya Investment Authority. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Derregia.
Good evening to you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you and to your audience. I'm very happy to be with you.
We're happy to have you join us. Now, at least 32 people were killed and dozens wounded last Saturday in Tripoli, in fighting in Tripoli. This is data according to Libya's health ministry. How did the latest dispute unfold, and who are the fighting parties? What do they really want?
Well, I think as is widely known, there is now a government that is competing with the government in Tripoli. It was appointed by Parliament. and this government sees itself as legitimate and wants to take control in Tripoli. The sitting government is still internationally recognized and is not accepting the replacement. So there's been tension brewing for a while, and I think what happened a few days ago was that the government forces have preemptively attacked units loyal to the new government in order to have more control of the capital and less mixed control over important parts of the capital. So the action was preemptive. The action was from the sitting government in Tripoli, and it was to reduce the chances of the newer government taking over Tripoli.
Now, Dr. Derregia, in May, the leader of the Eastern-based government in Tobruk, Fatih Bashaga, tried to move into Tripoli and was unsuccessful. How did things differ this time around? And was he also trying to take over government in Tripoli?
The fact of the matter is that the major fighting happened between units that are actually based in Tripoli, and none of them are officially forces loyal to Fatih Bashaga. They are forces that have leaning towards Fatih Bashaga. And I think beneath all of that, there is a security consolidation process going on. And we have seen it in the last clashes, which had nothing to do with the issue of two governments. It was clashes between different units in Tripoli, where some more organized units have taken over less organized units. And I think this is a consolidation process that is perhaps more internationally connected than a local affair. I think there is a desire to end this collection of militias that exist in Tripoli and reduce the number. Currently, we have 3 groups in Tripoli, as opposed to some 6, 7 groups that existed only 4 or 5 months ago. So there is a consolidation process that is not really connected with the government issue, but the government issue is a good excuse to execute that consolidation plan.
Okay. Now, talking about consolidation plan, you also have big players that are trying to, jostle for position and legitimacy. You have Abdelhamid Beibe in Tripoli, you have Fatih Bashaga in Tobruk, and there's also General Khalifa Haftar. Looking at these 3 interesting personalities, is there much of an ideological difference in how they operate and what they want? And is the will of the Libyan people, ordinary Libyan people, factored into any of the decisions they make?
I'll start with the last part. No, the will of the Libyan people is not factored in what they do, because the will of the Libyan people is to have elections and to vote for a new parliament and new president. That's the will of the Libyan people, and it's clear with 2.8 million registering to vote, to cast their votes. This shows a big interest on the part of the Libyan population to participate in elections. This is a right that has been prevented. So nobody really in power or close to power is listening to the Libyan population. That's the fact of the matter.
Now let's talk about this. Yes, go on, please, Dr.
Second, I think that the 3 groups, and I would add to them the Speaker of Parliament, who sees to himself as the President of Parliament, Aguila Saleh.
Yes,
that's another character in the Libyan drama, who's currently taking on the battle on the judicial system and the Supreme Court of Libya. Today, he actually wanted the Supreme Court to move from Tripoli to Baida, so it's more closely associated. I think we had enjoyed, as far as possible, quasi independent judiciary. We needed that. It's the last pillar of the state that hasn't been divided, and now it's in the process of being divided. And this is extremely dangerous, because once you divide the judicial authority, you have no recourse to any process.
They always
violence.
say the judiciary is the last hope of the people, and it's Mr. Akila Saleh that is leading this move to move the Supreme Court away from Tripoli. If I get you right.
That's correct. That's correct. I mean, he changed the law governing the Supreme Court, and I don't think it's the right time. And to change such a law, he needs the approval of the higher state council as well. This is the political agreement that exists in Libya. So there's another character. Now, if we look at, for example, the current Prime Minister, Hamid Beiba, he came in to organize elections with the undertaking that he will not himself stand for elections. He then stood for elections, and of course, there were other problems as well that prevented elections from taking place on the 24th of December 2021. Haftar is a military leader who's been consolidating his power on the east and south of Libya, and of course, he sees himself as the future president of Libya. Fathi Bashagha is somebody who was going to be prime minister, but he was beaten by Hamid Beiba to the post, and now he sees that the Hamid Beiba time in government has ended, and it is his turn to become prime minister. What is absent in all of this is that there is no constitutional basis for election, and what we need to move forward is to renew the legislative, to renew parliament, so that we could have a fresh start. If you look at the Higher State Council, formerly known as the General National Congress, it was elected in 2012 and became the Higher State Council as a result of the political agreement. You cannot have the same people in parliament without seeking re-election.
Elections. So that brings me, permit me to interrupt you here, Dr. Derregia. So you've mentioned all these people, even parliament. So you have all these actors in the east, you have actors in Tripoli, Beiba, Bashagha, Akila Saleh, even the parliamentarians in both cities. They have legitimacy questions because they have overstayed their term limit. So there's a big question of legitimacy. How do they go around, using an authority that they really don't have? What are ordinary Libyans doing? I understand there were protests in May, but how far did he go? People say they want to have their say in how they're being governed, the Libyan people.
Absolutely. I mean, this was the whole thing. This was the whole goal of 2011 revolution, is that the Libyans didn't want a president for life. They wanted to determine their own leadership and choose and have a say in who governs them and have some oversight about what governments do. And the usual route to that is through parliamentary elections and to presidential elections or government elections. Now, we had successful election in 2012 by all measures, but the thing is, the political dispute became a struggle for almost existential struggle. And people who came into power by vote refused to leave power by vote. So they are actually inventing ways to stop elections taking place over some issues that shouldn't really be delaying. Because for a state, you cannot really hang the fate of the state on one person or the desire of one person to have election laws designed specifically to allow them to stand or designed specifically not to allow them to stand. And this is the issue, is that it's almost as if they will only accept elections if the outcome already is known beforehand.
Is in your favor. Now, Dr. Derregia, don't you think the international community has some fault here? Because when these groups of politicians go past their term limits, when they don't contest elections, like the case of Prime Minister Abdulhamid Beiba, the international community, he still claims is the one recognized by the international community, and the international community still recognizes him as the legitimate Prime Minister of Libya. Should legitimacy not come from the Libyan people and not the international community? And what role are they playing?
I think this, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I said, should legitimacy not come from the international community? And in what ways is the international community trying to get Libya out of this conundrum?
I think you have hit a really important nail on the head here, because what happened in 2014 or in 2013, there was a big dispute inside the General National Congress. And it was divided between two different different political factions. And violence was used against that elected body to pass a law that will allow for parliamentary election. So it was actually coerced into passing that law. Except that when they passed that law and that constitutional amendment, they did not really have quorum. They did not have the required numbers under the roof at the time of the voting to pass a constitutional amendment. So once the election took place and the results came unfavorable to some groups, these groups went to the Supreme Court, went to the constitutional circuit in the Supreme Court and said, look, this constitutional amendment is at fault because it was passed without quorum. It violates the constitutional declaration. And the constitutional circuit has ruled that, yes, the evidence is they did not have the numbers to pass that amendment. And that has led to the split. People elected for parliament said that we were elected, that's it. And people in GNC, General National Congress, said they were elected, but on the basis of a problematic constitutional amendment, which actually has been found to be unconstitutional, and therefore the results are unconstitutional and their election doesn't stand. The international community comes in and says, look, this is not a legal problem, this is a political problem, it's better that you have a dialogue and agree on an outcome. The issue is the agreement, the political agreement that comes out of dialogue, although it's signed to by the parties see it as a maneuver in the process. They don't see it as an agreement in the sense that it is legally binding and it must be implemented. Add to that there are some international players who are supporting parties and encouraging them to violate the political agreement, because there is a power struggle over influence over Libya. And the reasons are obvious why there is a power struggle over influence over Libya. So the result is very unstable environment. You didn't allow the constitutional circuit, the Supreme Court, to enforce its judgment. My view, the correct process would have been to say, look, redo the election and correct the error. Sorry, but this has to be done. The international community didn't take that. And then in the process, the international community became the giver of legitimacy in Libya.
Which
it took away the rights for Libyans to determine their future. Now, maybe the intentions were not bad, but that is the consequence of what they did. So we had a political agreement, the international community became disinterested, and we had a prime minister who was meant to come, Sarraj, for 1 year, maximum 2 years. Parliament was meant to stay for 1 year, maximum 2 years, and they have stayed from December 2015 until now, September 2022.
Quite a complex situation.
All because they are actually the power in the land, and the international community recognizes them.
Yes, and has given them legitimacy. You mentioned something about an unstable environment which this power struggle has caused. Dr. Derregia, Libya had one of the highest standards of living in Africa. It had free education, free health care, and you were once the chairman of the Libya Investment Authority. My question to you, Dr. Derregia, is this. What are some of the effects of this clashes, this unstable political environment? I do recall that when you joined the conversation, you said you were joining using a generator. So power cuts used to be alien to Libya. It's almost like a part of life now. What are some of the effects of all of this on the Libyan people and the Libyan economy?
Well, Libya had a mixed past. So there were periods associated with high oil prices where Libya had enjoyed a very easy life and very high living standards. The issue is Libya is still totally dependent on oil. Libya has not, over 60 years since the discovery of oil, we have not overcome the dependency on oil. Now, when you are dependent on oil and producing 2-3 million barrels and your population is 1.5 million, is one thing. When your population is 7 million and you're producing 1.5 million barrels, you cannot sustain the living standard. This is exactly what happened in Libya, that over time, Libya, from the fastest growing economy in the late 1960s, and also in the early 70s, it slowly suffered from stagnation, slowly suffered from reducing income over time. And I think this issue of development, issue of finding alternatives to oil, moving into renewable energy, having industries based on oil and based on other natural resources has damaged Libya a lot. Now, since 2011, you would think that some of the errors of the past would have been corrected. What happened was they've actually got deeper into the dependency of oil, in addition to actually not having any production of oil for 5 years of the last 6 years.
Quite a tragic situation. Now, Dr. Derregia, elections, you've suggested elections. A majority of ordinary Libyans do want elections. But looking at Libya's history in the last half a century, there was 40 years of Gaddafi dictatorship, and there's 10, 11 years of this ad hoc arrangement. Would you say democracy is what it will take to fix the problem in Libya? Because all these players don't seem to really care much about what the people think. Is the problem a hangover of long-term dictatorship and selfish individuals that just want power for themselves? And can you really hold elections in an environment where you have militias roaming all over the place? So do you take care of the problem of militias first, or you contest, or you conduct elections? Which should come first? And what's your take on all of this?
My view is you need to build institutions first. And the international community should have focused on helping Libya, pushing for institutional building. What's been happening, maybe intentionally, maybe not intentionally, or in good faith, let's say it's a byproduct of international action, is that what Libyan institutions we have, last of which the judicial authority, are being undermined by the current situation, being undermined of having people in power because of international recognition, not because of the rule of Libyan law. I here speak to you, I have a Supreme Court ruling saying that
you should return.
My removal as chairman of the Libyan Investment Authority is actually invalid and must be annulled. But nobody is willing to implement it. So the issue is, if you take away the Libyan institutions, have you replaced them with international institutions? Well, international institutions are divided. Security Council is divided. Countries meddling in Libya's affairs are divided.
Yes.
And so the problem is really not election. Election will change the set of people that are here now, and that will have some renewal, some new blood coming in, maybe people who have been shaped by their experience and will have different actions to the current leadership. But it is the institution
what will it take to build those strong institutions?
I think it will take at least a good technocratic government that is not built on power sharing. Power sharing is the modus operandi of the international mediation. We have seen that in Iraq. We have seen that in the Lebanon, and we have seen that in other countries as well. It does not work. Power sharing does not work because it involves carving up the resources in that process of power sharing. It's having a say in an expression of your views, of your will, of your view of the country is one thing, but sharing the country, having a certain sect, for example, as happened in the Lebanon, controlling parliament. Parliament is Shia, the prime minister is Sunni, the president is Christian. That doesn't work.
But I guess they're doing that in order to keep all the parties happy. Because no one wants to give up power, so why don't you share it and be happy?
Yes, I mean that's a poor solution, because what happens is it becomes institutionalized. So now we have the head of parliament in certain countries is continuing to be from a certain section of a.
And then you also have a bloated government and more bureaucracy. I kind of understand your line. Now, Dr. Derregia, let's talk about the United Nations mission in Libya. The main elements of its mandate defined by the UN includes supporting Libyan transitional authorities in post-conflict efforts, providing mediation in implementing Libyan political agreements, supporting key Libyan institutions, and monitoring and reporting on human rights. How effective has the United Nations mission in Libya been in fulfilling its mandate? I do understand its headquarters is actually in Tunis.
Unfortunately, it has not been very effective, because it's relying mostly on the goodwill of the actors in Libya. And the actors have learned that if they ignore the United Nations, there are no consequences. In other words, even if there are elements of the United Nations work in Libya that is under Chapter 7, so it is enforceable, there's actually no will to enforce it by any country. And the Security Council has been divided, has not been able to sanction, for example, war crimes. We know that in Tarhuna, so far, there are tens of mass graves that had been discovered, with over 260 people identified, women, children, men that had been abducted, and they were executed and buried away. And there has been, nobody was held to account by the international community. So basically, this criminal behavior is more or less encouraged by the lack of punishment, because the international community is divided. So in short, I don't think the United Nations has been effective, because the power behind it, the Security Council mainly, is divided.
Now, I'm sure, Dr. Derregia, you would agree with me that the international community, when they came in and when NATO imposed the no-fly zone, failed to plan for the day after. That's why we're in this conundrum in Libya. My final question to you before I let you go, Doctor, is as a Libyan, as a patriotic Libyan, and as someone that has served the government and has observed all of this, pre-Gaddafi, post-Gaddafi, Gaddafi era and post-Gaddafi Libya, and seeing how everything is played out, how would you suggest that Libya can get out of this political crisis and security situation that it has? Because the danger would always be there that, you know, these clashes can flare up at any time.
It is danger to Libya and Libya's future, and it's also danger to Libya's surroundings, to Libya's neighbors. So it is really a critical issue. My view, my sincere belief is that the international community should work very hard to deliver a technocratic government that is supported by the international community to rebuild Libyan institutions, to fix the economy, to fix the electricity, and prepare it for election. When people are satisfied with the performance of their government, they will make good choices in election. They will choose people who can be successful in delivering services and security to them. But when people are dissatisfied, they tend to vote in a protest way. And that will lead probably to more problems than we would want from elections.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohsen Derregia, for your time. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I wish you and Libyan people all the best for the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rather than installing a new government at all costs, at the risk of dangerously deepening a nationwide rift and splitting the country once again into two, finding a consensual way forward should be the priority for all concerned in Libya. There is no right or wrong way out of Libya's political impasse. Both of the main options, a new power-sharing deal and an electoral roadmap, deserve consideration. Negotiations to flesh out either a new interim government with broad consensus and uncontested parliamentary endorsement, or a new and workable roadmap to elections would, without a doubt, be the best path for preserving a peaceful, united Libya. And Gbenga Aborowa, many thanks for joining Secure the Continent today. It's been an absolute pleasure being your host. Bye-bye.